corporate commercial partners are really going to drive your sport. I mean, even if you look at NASCAR, you look at NFL, which are, two huge sports, they're driven by corporate money investments. Where I see the future going is when more corporations start to see that they can sell more products, services, or information to the fans of pickleball, that's when they'll start buying sponsorships.
Well, hello. Welcome to the Future of Pickleball, the podcast where we talk about where the sport's going, how it's going to get there, who are the leaders of the sport that are going to take it there. Today we've got a good one for you. I have a man with us by the name of Mark Schelde. Comes from a 30-year background in sports marketing that has been taking him from sports all over the world. We're going to find out about that today and what his thoughts are on where pickleball's going to go and how it's going to get there. Let's welcome Mark Schelde. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
I'm great. I've really looked forward to this. We've had the opportunity to talk a number of times, and I'm fascinated with your background and what you've done in sports. Could you give us a little bit of background of 3 or 4 of the major events and sports that you've been involved with in your career?
Well, I've been living in Vail, Colorado since the 80s, and so I've been around a lot of skiing and snowboarding through my whole life. A lot of affluent sports such as golf, tennis, volleyball. For made-for-television, my background started back when they were doing made-for-television TV shows, and corporations started spending money on inventing TV shows around sports. Then I was very lucky enough to meet some people from the internet world and started working with Yahoo and AOL in the early days of technology and learned all about the digital world.
Very cool, very cool. I remember in one of our conversations you had described, I think it was in the early start of snowboarding, that you saw some similarities that you've seen in pickleball between snowboarding and skiing and pickleball and tennis. And how did that play out?
Well, back in the day when snowboarding first came out in the 80s, there was a huge friction between skiers and snowboarders. Ironically, skiers did not want snowboarders on the mountain. And today I see tennis players not wanting pickleball players on the courts. What was interesting is eventually skiers wanted to have snowboarders be skiers with their type of events. And what was interesting, snowboarders broke away and did their own thing. Mm-hmm. They didn't do race gates, they did half pipes. And actually, ultimately, snowboarding helped the ski industry bring in more people into the snow sports world, as well as they helped ultimately skis become better for consumers to buy because they made parabolic skis from the technology of snowboards.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, what is your path to pickleball? How did you begin to become aware of it? How did you get involved with playing? Give me a little bit of your background that way.
Well, about 10 years ago, I was working with Mark Johns, who's Ben Johns' father.
Oh.
And he and I worked in a company called iStratus, and Mark was the chief technology officer, and I was the chief marketing officer. And all of a sudden, he told me about his son Colin being a professional tennis player in Europe, and I was very intrigued with that through, you're talking to your coworkers, sure. And that was very intriguing. And then all of a sudden, he told me his middle child, Ben, won this pickleball event in Florida, and being a sports marketing person, I was like, what's pickleball?
Very cool, very cool. Now, are you a player yourself?
I am. Luckily enough, I was sent a couple paddles, and my growing up in high school, I played high school tennis, and but in my adult life, I didn't play much tennis. Living in Vail, I pretty much skied and mountain biked, and this pickleball has, I'm now pickled.
Oh, good. Now, with coming into that and your background in skiing, did you have any other sports history in your background?
Yeah, I grew up in Minnesota and played hockey, and received a Division I hockey scholarship and played 4 years of college hockey. And being an American back in the day, it wasn't easy to be in the NHL. Yeah. So I moved to Vail to ski for a year because you weren't able to ski in college when you're on a scholarship. And I've been in Vail for 40 years now, living there and living the lifestyle above 8,000 feet.
Very cool, very cool. Well, I find it very interesting, and so many of the people that I interview it seems that everybody from a legit sports background, doesn't matter what the sport is, they all seem to be migrating towards pickleball as they're done with whatever their youth sport was, or if they were professional athletes. So welcome to the team, buddy. I did want to get a little bit of a feel for you. You worked with major national brands. What do they look for? What is it in pickleball that might be attractive to them?
Well, it's interesting. My background first started in the production side of producing network TV shows with sports. So for 8 or 10 years, I was producing these 1-hour TV shows that were made from television events, from skiing, snowboarding, AVP volleyball. And what you learned is you learned how to develop an asset. So the assets are what you build.
Expand on that. Yeah, that's what I'm interested to hear.
So what happened back in the early days, you had to create assets, which is media, experiences. For example, Chrysler, I learned from different categories. Automotive, they're trying to get their bigger dealers to come to their events to have time with them. Well, these bigger car dealers can go anywhere they want in the world because they're wealthy. But when they can go ski with gold medal ski racers at an event and spend 3 days going to dinner with 300 people and it's a party, when you make that kind of an experience for sponsors, they can entertain their key clients that move their business. And that's what I learned in the early days. The automotive, they were the kings back in the day when they were doing that. Financial people were entertaining people that were doing the banking. Financial companies were like Charles Schwab. They were always trying to entertain people, which is why Charles Schwab became the exclusive sponsor of golf and skiing for the PGA Tour and the U.S. ski team.
So on this, one of the things that intrigues me as this sport is growing, it's exploding, is what is it about the sport of pickleball that you think could be attractive to these large national brand operators?
Well, what first of all is passion. So if you look at the bigger sports, you look at NFL, you look at NASCAR, those sports have very passionate fans. And sponsors want to go where they can engage with passionate fans. What I've been really amazed with, and I think there's so many cool things, which you have a lot of experts that know about the sport of pickleball, but what intrigues me is, it's one of the few sports you go to the courts by yourself and you can show up and you can play an open play. And that's very intriguing. It's not like you have to have someone to go, a foursome in tennis or a foursome in golf, and then if someone doesn't show, you're like, hey, you're ruining the foursome. It's one of those sports that you can just show up and meet people. It's very inclusive. It's not exclusive. And the next thing is all shapes and sizes can play. I mean, I play with family members, I play with friends, I play with anybody. I mean, it's really a great game where it's like ping pong, which really is you can be at a house at a party and anyone will play ping pong.
Sure.
And what's cool about pickleball is there's nobody that can't play pickleball. And that's really and it's about fun. I mean, really the bottom line is pickleball is about fun.
As we think about where things are going, we know now that the sport is on fire. It's just exploded everywhere. We've got celebrities coming in. We've got celebrity athletes coming into the game. As of this viewing, it's just been announced that the Super Bowl experience at the Phoenix in 2023 will have a pickleball component to it. Very, very interesting. When you see the future of pickleball, where do you see sponsors? How will they affect the game, or what will they affect the game? Will there be anything that they'll bring to help the effort?
Well, your corporate commercial partners are really going to drive your sport. I mean, even if you look at NASCAR, you look at NFL, which are, two huge sports, they're driven by corporate money investments. Even golf, I mean, every tournament has a huge corporation behind it that also drives the philanthropic behind a golf event in each town. So corporations, now that they see the fan base is rabid about the sport and they see all ages. I mean, so where I see the future going is when more corporations start to see that they can sell more products, services, or information to the fans of pickleball, that's when they'll start buying sponsorships with Pro Pickleball, leagues and buying players, sponsorships. But I think as a sports marketing person, what I think the real value is like the adult tournaments, the adult leagues. What's really amazing is, the over 30, over 40, over 50, over 60, over 70, over 80. I mean, these people want to win championships, and I think that sponsors want to go in there and engage and
cool.
be part of these people of all ages. And I think that, for cars and for financial services and for mobile phone companies, how could you not want to sponsor pickleball? And I think that's the exciting upside of this is for me as somebody in sports marketing is I now understand the sport. I've been around the sport for years, watching it and observing it. And now to help them come into the sport and monetize their investment with a sponsorship is really what this is all about.
Very cool. I think in terms of some of the sports that I've seen and I've been around myself, and my hope would be that as we see these large corporations beginning to invest in the sport of pickleball, is it possible that we'll actually see improvements in the sport, whether it's through facilities or through the quality of tournaments? Am I being fanciful, or is that something that we'll actually benefit from?
Well, I mean, I think you have to look at other sports. I mean, look at Major League Baseball. They've added teams to the playoffs. They didn't add teams to the playoffs because people inside baseball wanted to add teams to the playoffs. They're traditionalists, okay? Sponsors wanted more playoff games. Sponsors wanted more assets. Sponsors wanted more baseball in the playoffs. They wanted to have the teams running to make the playoffs. So sponsors drove the change of the game in baseball, and baseball's really the leader. If you looked at sports marketing, baseball's the leader of contracts with players. They're a leader of everything. And today they're changing because of sponsors. So here's pickleball in its very early stages. I mean, it's so new. It's barely out of kindergarten, to be honest with you, when I look at it.
Yeah.
And the sponsors are going to change it because they're going to invest money into it.
Now, when you say they'll change it, guide me a little bit on what that might mean.
Even in the last year, you're hearing people talk about rally scoring. Okay?
Sure.
Rally scoring is basically they can control the games to be on TV. If you're going to buy a 1 hour time buy or a 2 hour time buy and you want to fit X amount of games in, you want to have rally scoring to know that you're going to finish the game.
Sure.
That's a simple solution right there to go to rally scoring.
So now, one of the things that I know you've been pretty passionate about from the time I began chatting with you is your feeling that the youth component of pickleball needs to catch up or needs to get as involved as the adult components. Does that factor into how sponsors look at a sport?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest upside of the sport. I mean, and it's really for the goodness of the sport. I mean, if you look at any other sports, developing youth players is the key, because that's where you're planting the seeds. You're not only planting seeds to have more players, to have people be better players, but what you're really doing is you're developing fans. So to me, what's really amazing is there's no youth pickleball pipeline. So one of the things I'm looking at is how do you develop youth pickleball where you have U10, U12, U14, U16, U18 kids where they have goals to win state championships and win national championships, and then the families start following it, and then that makes them all start watching more professional pickleball,
Sure.
which ultimately makes them buy more paddles and buy more balls and buy more pickleball equipment, and then all of a sudden you're going to see pickleball stores popping up, and then as we've already seen, people building pickleball courts with restaurants, and the industry is just going to explode. And I think, for the people that watch these podcasts that are into pickleball right now today, it's kind of like living in San Diego in the 70s. It doesn't get any better. I mean, you're going to see so much explode over the next 5 years of technology with paddles and technology with balls and shoes, and everything's going to change. And 30 years from now, you're going to be like, oh, nothing's changed in the game of pickleball. But right now, it's exploding. And all the investment of endemic sponsors with paddles and balls to, commercial partners of Fortune 500 companies coming in to invest to be part of the community. And I think that's really what pickleball has is it's a fun community to be part of. And what corporation doesn't want to get in there and say, we want to support your community?
Sure, cool. Now, in where you're have been a very interesting guy for me to know, because from my deep involvement in the sport of pickleball for a decade now, I had never met anybody in our sport yet that's actually come from your kind of background. If somebody's watching this or hearing us talk and they want to figure out how to penetrate the sport, or how to enter the sport of pickleball, how do they reach you? How do they get in touch with you?
Well, I have a website, gravitysportsmarketing.com, which is the easiest way. I'm LinkedIn. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. But really, people in the corporate world, what really this is going to happen is people are going to start talking to ask people what they should do when they get into the sport. And really, that's where it comes down to, is you want somebody who's an expert on sports marketing, and you want somebody who also understands the sport of pickleball. And I've been very blessed for the last 3 or 4 years to be able to observe it through, some eyes of the top pros.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. Now, with what you're doing in looking at it from a business standpoint, but also from your personal involvement in playing the sport and having a good time with it, if you would look into your crystal ball and go out 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, any thoughts or ideas on what you think we might see coming forward in the future of pickleball?
Yeah, I think when you look at sports marketing, you can say, well, you look at your traditional television sports, and that's going to unfold. And, you're going to have, let's just look at the pro level. You're going to have people from all different sports coming into pickleball. You're going to have ex-NFL, ex-Major League Baseball players with great hand-eye coordination. We don't know where they're going to come from. And so it's not just tennis team. It's not just going to be tennis players. It's going to be people coming from all sorts of sports that were just great athletes. But what's going to happen is when corporations come in and the prize money starts to go up, and all of a sudden you have real prize money where someone can make a real living, and then you have the media and the following, that's going to be intriguing to see where the pro game goes, right? I think the biggest upside for pickleball is when you look at the Tough Mudder, and you look at Spartan, and you look at Ironman triathlons, those guys make money not on pros. They make money on participation. And if I were in the game of pickleball, as far as working for one of the pro tours or working on building adult, leagues or tournaments, I'd be looking at what they did with Spartan and what they did at Tough Mudder, because they made it an experience where whether you wanted to go with your sister or you wanted to take a date or you wanted to go with your family or your kids, they made it an experience to go do these Tough Mudders, and they do it. So I think the biggest upside in sports marketing for pickleball is going to be, how cool would it be if you said, I'm going to bring 4 of my friends to Las Vegas or Florida or Arizona, and it's like a 2-day pickleball camp, and then during the camp they're going to tell you what level you are, and so like, hey Mark, you're a 4, and your friend's a 5, and your other friend's a 3.5, and then for the next 2 days you play in a tournament, and it's like 4 or 5 days of partying and having fun and meeting people that love pickleball. I think that's the upside of pickleball, is having that experience for adults, and I see the resorts, all the resorts engaging that to say, come down and we want 600 people coming to our resort for a week. That's the upside, I think, with the adult side. But there's no doubt the number one priority is youth pickleball. That's where this has to be. That's where it has to be legitimized. It has to be where the state champion for U12, and you want to be proud that you won the U12 championships in whatever state you live.
Yeah.
That's really the upside that I see.
Yeah, you're really talking about sort of the little league of Major League Pickleball. This is sort of the little league where, just like baseball, they're playing the same game as the big kids, but they're doing it age appropriate.
Absolutely.
And
that's where, again, sports marketing is all about blending commercial partners with a sport. That's what sports marketing is. And when you start to develop these adult camps I'm talking about, or these experiences for adults to play pickleball, and you have youth pickleball, now all of a sudden you have real things for corporations to come in and sell more cell phone services, or sell more cars, or sell more financial services to these people that are passionate about something, and the sponsors are making it a better experience. That's really what sports marketing is all about.
Very cool, very cool. My closing question to you is the one that I use with most of my guests, is if you could do whatever you wanted to do in pickleball, whatever you see in these 3 or 4 years that you've been about it, what's your vision of what Mark and Gravity Sports Marketing do? What would you like to see happen?
Well, I've spent a lot of time around the golf world with PGA Tour, and I think one of the coolest things in sports is the Pebble Beach golf tournament for PGA Tour, where I personally know from Chuck Schwab. I ran Charles Schwab Sports Marketing for 12 years. Chuck would not ski until February because he wouldn't risk getting hurt to go play in the Pebble Beach tournament. And he had Phil Mickelson as partner, and he trained, so he wanted to go play in the Pebble Beach tournament, which was a real PGA Tour event where he played with Phil. And I think if I was going to say what would be the one project I'd want to work on is make that high-end celebrity businessman, woman, high-end celebrity, movie star, whatever, who loves pickleball, but they have to be good. I mean, they'd have to be a single handicap golfer. They'd have to be out there where they're not, spraying balls into the crowd, hurting people. Where you'd say this person's into pickleball, and build a tournament where you have the top pros and the top celebrities who are actually buying a way into the tournament to make a nonprofit event, which is what it was all about for many years, and make this really cool event where you're blending. And pickleball is perfect because you can play with different levels of ability and be competitive. And so that would probably be the one thing I'd love to see happen is a high-end celebrity event with the high-end pros, and make it really a fun weekend where they're actually in the competition.
Wow, that should be the future of pickleball. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much. Let's welcome Mark Schelde one more time. Mark, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Paul. I really appreciate it.